Hello, I'm Rufus Purdy. I'm the director of Right Here, and in between 2012 and 2018 I worked as an editor at the Curtis Brown Literary Agency and Curtis Brown Creative, the agency's writing school. While I was there, I helped lots of authors make their way towards publication, including Jane Harper, who wrote The Dry, and Nicholas Searle, who wrote The Good Liar. As well as that, I'm also an experienced editor, and I've worked on books as diverse as Alex Gerlis's best-selling spy novels and the music memoir Some Fantastic Place by Squeeze songwriter Chris Difford. I work with authors all the time to get their novels ready for publication or submission to literary agents, and in fact I've just heard that two of the authors I've worked with recently, Adam Simcox and Lorraine Peck, have both gone on to sign book deals with major publishers. I'm going to be teaching Right Here Online, our very first online novel writing course, and in the run-up to that course I'm going to be sharing some of my tips on what I feel are the most essential aspects of novel writing. This week we're going to be looking at voice and narrative point of view. What do people mean when they talk about voice in a novel? Well, voice is essentially where the head of the book's narrator or narrators is at. The voice is not just about the way your narrator speaks, but it also takes in their worldview, their prejudices, their experiences and hopes, and much more. And it's through all these elements that the story is filtered through to the reader. Once you've settled on who your narrator is going to be, you need to decide whether to go all out and give them a bold, distinctive voice, perhaps using the slang associated with a particular social group, or a dialect from a certain region or another historical era. Or are you going to keep the language quite formal and easy to process for your readers? Will the voice you use throughout the novel be funny, camp, self-deprecating, arrogant, naive, philosophical, or something else entirely? Sometimes this choice is an unconscious one, driven entirely by the author's innate preferences. At other times it's a very conscious decision, made in order to develop character or set the tone of the novel. Choosing which narrative point of view to use in your novel is a much more practical decision for the author. All novels are told either in first, second or third person, and whichever one of these you go for, the choice has huge repercussions for your story. Here are my thoughts on the various points of view available to you and their advantages and disadvantages. A first-person narrative, from the point of view of I, can be an incredibly effective method of telling your story. By filtering the novel's action through one particular character, you can not only develop a distinctive storytelling voice, but you can also create an intimate, immediate tone that takes the reader right into the heart of the action. Staying in the head of one character for an entire novel, though, can be very limiting for you as an author. For a start, you're only able to dramatise scenes that the narrator is personally involved in, so you don't have the freedom to move around as a third-person narrative would, and show the reader a wider range of action and characters. You can get around the limitations of being in just one character's head for the entirety of a novel by choosing to tell the story from several different characters' point of view. By going with this option, you can show the reader a wider variety of scenes and create a lot of drama and tension through the disparities between different characters' takes on the same situation. And why stop at two first-person narrators? You can cover even more in a novel if you go with 3, 4 or even more. But I really wouldn't recommend that any first-time author attempt this. It's hard enough to come up with one convincing, authentic, unique first-person voice, and to create another that's completely different from the first is doubly tricky. Now imagine that you have to do that 5 times over. Remember that it's absolutely essential that each of your characters' first-person voices are distinct from each other, otherwise how is the reader to distinguish between them? A third-person narrative, from the point of view of he, she or they, is the most traditional way of telling a story. And anyone who's ever read one of those really thick Victorian novels will be familiar with the third-person omniscient narrator, a detached, all-knowing voice that moves between characters and scenes, revealing the action without restriction and often intruding on the story in a somewhat lofty manner. While an author that chooses to employ an omniscient narrator has the freedom to dramatise any scene they choose, and they can reveal anything and everything to the reader, they also risk disorienting them with changes in perspective or by clogging up the novel with pages of the florid descriptive prose they've now got the freedom to use at will. Though there's still an element of detachment to this point of view, a third-person, close, single viewpoint is seen by many authors as being the best of both worlds. It allows them to tie the narrative to one particular character while still giving them the freedom to move out of their head occasionally to use the authorial voice or reveal scenes that the character isn't witness to. Because the reader is privy to the thoughts and behaviour of just one character, it can feel like a first-person narrative, providing intimacy and evoking sympathy for that person, and allowing the author to create a distinctive voice for them too. But the author still has plenty of room for scene setting and world building, which would feel much more forced and obtrusive in a solely first-person voice. While an omniscient narrator can feel very much like the author moving around their cast of characters and dropping in on them to reveal story, a third person, close multiple viewpoint sticks to two or more narrators and shows the story from their unique points of view. The author can create distinctive voices for these characters and allow us to be privy to their deepest thoughts, or they might take a more detached view and allow the action to dictate the order in which the characters are visited. As with any novel involving multiple viewpoints though, the author needs to be extremely careful not to overwhelm the reader with too many characters and perspectives. A second-person narrative, from the point of view of you, is rarely used in fiction. While Phoebe Waller-Bridge and Miranda Hart are able to create a sense of intimacy by turning to the camera and directly addressing the TV audience, this technique just doesn't work very well on the page. It comes across as a bit accusatory and nagging, even if the you being addressed is another character rather than the reader. First-time authors should avoid using it. I'll be going into lots more detail about voice and narrative point of view, as well as all the other essential aspects of novel writing, on our Right Here online novel writing course. That course lasts for 8 weeks and costs just £99, and you can enrol now by going to writehereuk.com and clicking on Creative Writing Courses.